Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, ANSI CAN UL 325 2020, Safety Essentials for Your Door or Gate Business. My name is David Makepeace. I'm the General Sales Manager here at Miller Edge. A few housekeeping items just before we get started. So this presentation is scheduled to last roughly 50 minutes. It is being recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch and come back at any time to review. And for those watching live, we do have a chat box available that you can submit questions to. We'll aim to answer as many of these as we can at the end of today's presentation. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. I'm David on the far left. We have Steve Kuscsik, Principal Engineer for UL Solutions in the middle, and Amancio Sanchez, International Sales Manager for Miller Edge on the far right. Just a little bit about me and my background. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Manchester in the UK. I have over 15 years of experience in sales and customer relations. I joined Miller Edge in 2014 as part of the inside sales team. I was the regional sales manager for the Eastern US before becoming general sales manager in 2022. And I've given entrapment protection training and education sessions to numerous manufacturers, distributors, dealers, architects, and others. I really enjoy working with both door and gate professionals to help understand the industry requirements, how to ensure compliance, and the solutions available to create and grow successful businesses. Next up, we're honored to have with us Steve Kuscsik, Principal Engineer at UL Solutions. Steve has over 30 years of experience in product safety and more than 20 years in the automated door and gate industries, developing and maintaining safety requirements for automated door and gate operators. As the lead technical representative and voting member on the UL 325 Standards Technical Panel, Steve actively contributes to shaping industry standards. Additionally, he serves on IEC and NEC committees. He also holds the IDEA Automated Gate Systems Designer certification. And in his role, Steve collaborates closely with manufacturers, code officials, CPSC, industry groups, and other stakeholders to bring safe and compliant products to market. He's involved in UL 325 training and education for both UL staff and industry professionals, and his contributions and involvement across various industry events, including DASMA meetings, IDA conferences, AFA's Fence Tech, and other events, highlight his commitment to safety and compliance in the automated door and gate industries. And finally, we have Amancio Sanchez, International Sales Manager covering the Americas for Miller Edge. Amancio graduated with a Bachelor of Commerce from York University in Toronto and has over 30 years of sales management experience with various Fortune 500 companies. In 2014, he joined Miller Edge as a key member of the business development team, dedicated to assisting Canadian businesses with safeguarding solutions for commercial motorized doors and automated vehicular gates. His role has actually since expanded to encompass international markets, including the Caribbean, Mexico, and South America. Amancio is a trusted partner for door and gate professionals, always striving to deliver quality products, valuable insights, and innovative business opportunities. That concludes our presenters. We also have with us Mary Adams, Marketing and Communications Coordinator for Miller Edge. She is on the line to help us monitor the chat box for any questions. So here is a brief overview of what we'll be covering in this session and the learning objectives. So it's split up into 3 sections. I'll be covering the initial portion, discussing the history, background, and transition from the legacy CSA standard to UL 325. Next, Steve will take us through some of the key differences between CSA 247 and the UL 325 standard. Now, we are limited by time, so this will not cover every single detail, For any specific aspects that are not covered in our overview, just reach out to us and we'll be happy to discuss offline. And a reminder again that we do have the chat box that we'll be monitoring, so feel free to put questions in here. If we have time at the end, we'll try to answer as many of those as we can before we wrap up. And finally, Amancio is going to talk to us about some of the various benefits that UL 325 brings to the industries we serve. So as an evolving standard that encompasses both rigorous requirements for products used and the overall installation, we'll see how it sets a foundation for professionalism and improved customer satisfaction. So let's dive into part one, UL 325 and the regulatory landscape. So under the Canadian Constitution, there is a division of powers between the federal and provincial / territorial governments. So the federal government has jurisdiction over areas such as defense, communications. The provinces and territories have jurisdiction over others like education, health, and importantly to us here today, electrical safety. So technically you have 13 separate electrical safety regulatory authorities in Canada. Regulatory decisions made within each jurisdiction are not subject to any national authority, although in reality the systems across Canada are very similar thanks to widespread and long-term collaboration between the various jurisdictions. All electrical regulatory activities at the provincial or the territorial level start with a statute or an act. So these establish the overall legal framework under which the electrical safety regulatory programs operate. Then you have regulations, which fall under the authority of statutes or acts, but they'll set out more specific requirements. And as a side note, regulations will have binding legal effect. Typical electrical safety regulation will cover things like equipment standards, installer qualifications and licensing, permits, inspections, things such as that. Next, we have codes, these are typically broad sets of rules designed for an industry to follow as best practice. So they'll usually have no legal force until they're actually adopted by a particular jurisdiction. Every province and territory in Canada adopts and enforces the same electrical installation code. That will be CSA standard C22.1, more commonly known as the Canadian Electrical Code Part 1 or just CEC Part 1. It's worth noting that some provinces and territories also make amendments to the CEC prior to adoption. Finally, a standard is a document that provides engineering or technical requirements for products, practices, methods, or operations for different fields. Standards usually start out as voluntary and will only become mandatory once adopted into law through a code or regulation. For example, Part 2 of the Canadian Electrical Code consists of hundreds of individual standards for electrical machinery, appliances, parts, materials, which are used by connection to power sources wired according to regulations in Part 1. So Part 2 is where you would now find UL 325. Standards can also come in many different shapes and forms, and it's just worth mentioning that here, that they can be performance-based, which would be how to test something. They can be prescriptive, calling out specific features or attributes of a product, design-based, so specific design and technical characteristics, and others. So you can see there's a connecting thread which can run from standards into codes, regulations, and then into an act or a statute. So just because you're looking at a standard, don't automatically assume that it isn't a requirement to comply. So there's two main organizations that we are going to be talking about here. The first is CSA, which stands for Canadian Standards Association. The second is UL Enterprise, which is made up of three organizations. You have UL Solutions, UL Standards and Engagement, and then UL Research Institutes. Both organizations, CSA and UL Enterprise, are similar in that they have two main functions that we are interested in for this particular session. First, they act as SDOs, or Standards Development Organizations. That means they help develop minimum standards for design, construction of various products. Secondly, they act as what are known as CBs in Canada, certification bodies, and NRTLs in the US, nationally recognized testing laboratories. So in a nutshell, CBs or NRTLs act as a third-party testing agency which evaluates a product to a given standard. Also, I'll mention here a few key others. So we have CDI, which is the Canadian Door Institute, which you'll be familiar with. DASMA, which is the Door and Access Systems Manufacturers Association. IDA, the International Door Association. ANSI is the American National Standards Institute. They don't actually create standards, so they provide voluntary guidance on product safety and conformity specs for various industries. UL 325 is an ANSI approved standard, as an example. ASTM is the American Society for Testing and Materials. They're another SDO who publish a related important standard called ASTM F2200, which is focused more on gate construction requirements for automated systems. We're not going to be touching on that aspect today, but it's worth noting as a key resource for any gate professionals working with automated systems. Finally, we have SCC. Now, the SCC, which stands for the Standards Council of Canada, has various roles, but importantly, SCC provides and monitors standards and publication development for safety products in Canada. And the SCC can adopt or declare product safety standards as national standards of Canada. And what this does is it helps to avoid confusion if multiple standards exist. And this is what happened with UL 325, as we'll see here shortly. So here's the top level view of UL 325. So it's published by UL, focuses on standards for products classed as automated opening, closing devices. It was first published in 1973 and primarily seen originally as a US standard. So it was approved by the Department of Defense, and ANSI is an official US standard. Now, there have been many revisions since that date, including 7 official editions of the standard, the latest being 2017, as you can see on the slide here. Now, UL 325 covers many different product types. We're going to be focusing on the top 3 here: residential garage door operators, commercial and industrial garage door operators, and gate operators. However, you'll see here that there are actually many others, and that will include accessories, where you would find standards for specific items such as entrapment protection sensors. Now, here's a great visual illustration just to show the history of revisions to UL 325 since its inception. You can see that the standard has been constantly improving, developing to ensure that it meets the needs of the industry and the public as well. New additions are shown in blue at the bottom, and then green shows the major revisions and updates at the top. So here's a top level view of the CSA C22.2 247 standard, which is what we'll refer to as the legacy standard in Canada for products similar to those dealt with by UL 325. So the CSA standard was first published in 1992 and was at the time very closely based on the existing UL 325 standard. Now, there have been a few revisions, including an official second edition that was published in 2014. And it's worth noting that this standard was enforced by being included in the Canadian Electrical Code. C22.2 is part 2 of the code and is the section where product standards such as this one have typically been listed. The code is then adopted at the provincial territorial level, as we saw before. At the top of the screen, you can see how the CSA standard developed over time compared to UL 325 below. So you can see the difference in terms of the overall number of updates and changes. And again, The new additions are shown in blue, with major revisions and updates in green. So we have these two standards, one focused on the US market and one focused on the Canadian market. And over time, the two standards diverged significantly. So what does this mean? Well, firstly, it meant that new technology wasn't being addressed equally. It depended on how and if it was taken on by each individual standard. Secondly, safety requirements that the industry as a whole thought were essential weren't implemented the same in both countries. You also had manufacturers that were faced with their own specific challenges, including things such as how to build product for both countries. And it also resulted in retailers and distributors being provided with inconsistent messaging on the safety standards. So what to do? Well, various options were considered to bring alignment within North America, whilst trying to ensure that there was fair representation and effective standards development to handle new tech and safety requirements. There was widespread industry support for a proposal that UL 325 become a binational Canada-US solution. So the Standards Council of Canada outlined a process for this, and between 2015 and 2017, a binational harmonization group worked towards the creation of the new standard. Now, there's a panel that works specifically on the UL 325 standard. It's called an STP, or Standards Technical Panel. The reason for the panel is so that standards development can follow what we call a CSDS, or a Collaborative Standards Development System. In a nutshell, what this means is that the STP is made up of various interest groups. So anybody can make proposed changes and provide comments on proposals. Once discussed and reviewed, the final proposals are voted on by a panel, and you can actually join and become a member of this or other STPs if you want to take a more active role in the direction of the standard. Talk to me afterwards if you're interested, or talk to Steve, and you can also find more information on UL's website. So the existing STP for 325 was expanded to ensure it was fairly representative of both Canadian and US interests. And this existing, the expanded STP used the Canadian Electrical Code and the legacy standards as key resources, along with the existing UL 325 standard at the time. The result of all of that hard work was a new binational standard, officially called ANSI CAN UL 325 2017. It was officially adopted as a national standard in Canada in May 2017, and you can see the listing on the screen here from the Standards Council Canada website. In January 2018, an updated Canadian Electrical Code, CSA C22.1-18, was published, and that included ANSI CAN UL 325 in the list of referenced standards for electrical equipment for product safety in Canada. If you recall, this is how the legacy 247 standard was also enforced. With the new CEC released in 2018, we saw adoption of the new requirements by provinces and territories. Keep in mind that it's the provinces and the territories that have ultimate jurisdiction. So we saw certification of products to the new ANSI CAN UL 325 standard by manufacturers, and then new products on the market in the US and Canada that met that standard. And the final step really is authorities having jurisdiction begin making and asking for the required compliance with those with that new standard. There was still some confusion, and that really revolved around the legacy standard not being officially removed or addressed in terms of its effect. So we had some manufacturers that were continuing to sell products labeled to the legacy standard. So in 2021, the CSA issued a certification notice, which you can see on the screen here. It was aimed at manufacturers, outlining that as UL 325 had been adopted as a national standard of Canada and now further revised in 2020, the revised 2020 version would supersede the CSA 22.2247 standard effective March 1st, 2023, this year. Subsequently, we saw manufacturers take steps to stop manufacturing products to the old legacy standard, and this leaves UL 325 as the only effective applicable standard in Canada for these products. That's why many of you have seen numerous announcements from manufacturers recently on this topic. So that brings you up to today. So hopefully you can now see how the CSA and the UL standards began, why the industry decided to move universally to 325 for North America, and how the timeline has played out. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Steve, who is going to take us through some of the key differences between CSA 22.2247 and the ANSI CAN UL 325 standard. So Steve, over to you.
Hey, great, thanks, David. And before I begin my part and go to the next slides, I want to just reiterate or underline one of the things you mentioned, and that's that the UL standard and the CSA standard certainly diverged and went separate ways over the years. Basically, the CSA standard, since its inception, stayed pretty much stagnant and was not really updated to address the current safety issues and the evolving technology and the product types that were on the market. On the other hand, the UL standard did keep pace with what was happening in the industry. It was very active with lots of industry input from both the US and the Canadian side. And it's been updated a number of times to reflect the safety concerns, the technology, and the product types. So the next few slides, we'll go through a few examples of some of the key safety requirements that are in the most current version of UL 325 and how they differ from what was in CSA 247. So next slide, please.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That was a great point.
So what I'm going to do here is show a couple of slides, and I believe that many of the attendees work with residential garage door operators and commercial door operators and gate operators. So those are the product types that I'm going to focus on. This slide talks about residential garage door operators, and the way the table is set up, I'm going to talk about some of the features and functions and safety requirements on the left side. Talk about what the UL 325 requirements are in the middle, and how the CSA standard addresses or doesn't address these same concerns. So the first thing at the top left is what we call unattended operation. You guys are probably all very familiar with this for residential garage door operators, that you can use your cell phone or any Wi-Fi enabled device to basically monitor the status of your door and close your garage door from any location where you have an internet signal or a cell signal. And these requirements were put in about 10 years ago in UL 325. And basically it added a lot of convenience, of course, for users. And when you say increased safety, so you can see if you left your door open, you can actually close the door. But with this additional convenience came some additional risks. Hey, you're not local. You're not right there by the door watching the door close. So you may not know what's in the vicinity of the door before it closes. So to balance the convenience with the potential safety risks, what the industry came up with is when you press your phone or send a signal from your phone to close your door, the garage door operator has to have a visual alert, basically flash its lights for 5 seconds minimum, and have an audible alert also for 5 seconds minimum before the door can start closing. The idea there is it's alerting somebody who's in the vicinity of the garage that, hey, something's going to happen. I better beware and get out of the way. Additionally, it can only try 2 times to close your garage door. So if you send a signal from your phone to close the door and something is obstructing the door, the photo eye gets tripped, the edge sensor gets pressed, or it hits a solid obstruction and the door reverses, you'll get a note on your phone that the door didn't close properly. You can try one more time with your phone. If the door reverses again, it says something's going on there and you're not there to see what's happening. So it basically locks out your phone, so your phone cannot continue to try to close the door onto an obstruction. And then somebody local by the garage door has to press a wall control or a local keypad or a local remote in order to have the door operate properly, and then your phone can restore connection. So it's, again, another safety feature. It's also, these unattended operation feature is restricted to certain door types. So think of the California doors, some people call them. They're the one-piece doors. Since they have a different movement when they're opening and closing, the industry decided that this unattended operation shouldn't be applicable for that type of door. So those requirements are all built into UL 325 and are in there today. The CSA standard is never updated to address any of that. The next line item is very similar, but unattended operation accessory. So many of the features I just talked about are built into the new garage door operators today, but there are also some aftermarket devices. You could buy an accessory to try to retrofit onto an existing garage door operator to then enable your phone to close your door. So those same basic requirements are applicable for accessories that are sold separately on the market, and they're all embodied in UL 325. Again, the CSA 247, if you look at the right-hand column, doesn't address any of that. Another thing I wanted to talk about with residential garage operators is the partially open door reversal requirements. So what was happening, the requirements that were in the standard up until 325 had changed, was when a garage door is going down, if it hits an obstruction, it has to stop and initiate reversal within 2 seconds. But what was happening is some people, if they saw the door hit something in reverse, they would quickly press the wall button. And then what that would do, it would stop the door right away. And sometimes the timing of pressing the button, people are panicking, they keep pressing the button, and the door would go down again, hit the obstruction again, and then go back up a little bit, and then go back down. So it was basically continue to hit that obstruction because people were repeating to press the button. So what happened is the requirements were updated to say, okay, when it hits an obstruction, it has to stop and reverse at least 2 inches before pressing on your wall control is going to take any action at all. So kind of took that panic pressing of the button element out of it and resulted in a little bit safer requirement so the door does reverse off the obstruction. Again, the CSA 247 standard doesn't address that. The last thing on this slide I wanted to show is horizontal doors. When you think of residential garage doors, you mostly think of a vertical door, a one piece or a sectional door, but there are some doors for residential garages that are horizontally moving. It's kind of a niche product about 10 years ago, and it's gained some traction. But when those products came on the market, said, okay, what are the safety requirements for those? Of course, the movement of it is horizontally, left to right. It wraps around some of the inside of your garage wall, and there's different potential entrapment zones in areas. So there were specific requirements added, a small section in UL 325 to address the safety requirement for horizontal doors. Again, the CSA standard, if you look at that, wasn't updated to address any of that. So just wanted to point out some of those key differences. Let's move to the next slide, thanks, for gate operators. And again, we're going to go through the same kind of process. You get the rhythm now of the requirements and what's in the UL standard and what's in or not in the CSA standard. So the first part is the gate classes and gate types. This goes back all the way to about the year 2000, so about 23 years ago, when gates and specific requirements for different types of gates were added to UL 325. Think about sliding gates and swing gates and vertical pivot gates and overhead moving gates. There's all different types of gate movement and gate installation environments, whether it's a residential application, a commercial application, an airport high security application. So the industry got together and said, there's got to be specific requirements for each of these because the risks are different and the products and installations are often different. So added to the UL 325 standard was the gate classes, class 1, 2, 3, and 4. There were requirements added for certain gate classes so that the gate can't move over a certain speed. So, hey, slower might be safer. So let's slow down some of these gates. There were requirements added for the instruction manual. That was a big section that was updated in UL 325 to say the instruction manual has to talk about the gate operator class, the installation environment, the safety requirements for external devices that are going to be installed. So a lot of information was added to the instruction manual and then requirement for entrapment protection schemes. So that was all added in the year 2000 and it made a big change to the industry. It became effective in the standard in 2000 and was a big change to the industry. The CSA 247 standard, if you look even today or the last updated version, doesn't have anything for gate operators at all. Even though the title of it says gate operators, there's nothing in there about specific for gate operators other than I think a heating test for a parking gate operator. That was it. So the next line is entrapment zones defined. For gate operators, of course, they're sliding or swinging or vertically moving, and there's different zones, we call it, that are risk zones where somebody is more or less likely to get entrapped or caught between a moving gate and another object. So the entrapment zones were defined in UL 325, and then that was added to the installation manuals. And it also aligned with ASTM F2200, which is an industry standard for automated gate construction. The last thing on this slide is the requirements for the means to protect against entrapment. Most people call this entrapment protection means or entrapment protection devices. And there were a lot of changes in 325, and they continue to evolve over the years regarding this. Basically, you talk about photo eyes, edge sensors, light curtains, and how many do you need for a gate operator? How many do you need for each entrapment zone? Where do you install these? How do you install these? What specific edge sensor can you use with manufacturer X gate operator? So all of that was addressed in the standard in a lot of detail. And again, things were added to the instructions to say what exact devices you need to have. One of the big things in here is the third bullet point from the bottom is that it has to be monitored. So what that means is the edge sensor or photo eye, when it's connected to the gate operator has to monitor that device. So if it's not connected at all, the gate operator knows that and will not allow automatic operation of the gate in that direction. Or if it is connected, photo eye is connected, but it fails to operate properly, the gate operator will monitor and know that and will not allow automatic operation. So all those requirements are in there. They're state of the art for the industry today, but the 247 standard doesn't address that. Okay, you can flip to the next slide. So this is the last one on the details and the examples, but the top of this section is for commercial garage door operators. I know many people on the phone probably specify, sell, or install, or service these. And what used to be in the standard years ago was that you could have what's called a 3-button control station. Basically, we'll think of an electrical box like a light switch box, and it has 3 buttons, one for open, one for close, and one for stop. And that was permitted in the standard, both the UL and CSA standard, as entrapment protection. That was the only safety device you needed for a commercial overhead door. You didn't need an edge sensor or photo eye, right? You just 3-button control station, you're good. That changed around 2010. It changed in the UL standard. That was no longer permitted as a safety device. Instead, you have to have either constant contact on a button that's wired in view of the door. So you're pressing and holding on a button to close the door, and that's your oversight is providing safety. Or you had to have provision for connection of an edge sensor, photo eye, light curtain. That's, again, a monitored device. So if you connect one of those to your commercial door operator, then you can have the door close automatically on a timer or remote control. So that was added to the 325 standard, and as of today is still what the industry abides by. The CSA 247 standard under that never updated to address that. So a big difference there for commercial door operator systems. At the bottom of this slide are a couple other things that are somewhat relevant. External entrapment protection devices. So wireless devices. Think of a photo eye or edge sensor. They used to have to be wired back to the operator head. There are many products on the market now that are wireless. They're battery operated. They should send a wireless signal, easier to install, less wiring involved. But they operated slightly differently. So there were some requirements added to UL 325 to make sure that was a reliable operation and that they would operate properly. So those are in the standard. Also, light curtains. Okay, light curtains are becoming more popular. They're very useful for certain installations, but there were no specific requirements in the standard years ago. But that was updated in UL 325 to say how to actually test and install a light curtain, which might be different than a point-to-point photo eye. Again, 247 doesn't address either of those. And the last thing I want to mention, and this is something that's actually in the works right now, so you're getting kind of a preview of what might come, is for battery-operated products. Battery-operated products are on the market already. There's many of them you may be seeing, battery backup for a garage door operator or battery backup for an outside gate operator. But the UL 325 standard doesn't have a full set of requirements to address that yet. So the industry came up with a proposal, and that's actually in the proposal process and in the review stage right now. And so you'll probably see that added probably in a few months or so to UL 325 or battery operated products. Again, I'm not aware of anything happening on the CSA 247 side for that. So that was just a summary of some of the high level requirements and examples that may apply to you. This slide that we're showing now, I don't intend, by the way, to go through this slide in detail. This is just a more detailed explanation of some of the changes and a timeline for some of the changes. This only goes up to 2013. So there's 10 years that have passed since 2013 and a heck of a lot of changes that have occurred in the last 10 years. So the purpose of this is just to show you that there's a lot more detail related to the changes beyond what I had covered. And there are a lot more changes also that have been implemented in 325 that are not in 247. If anyone's interested in more detail, reach out to any one of the speakers, after this webinar, and be glad to share more information with you. So what do you take away from this? Right? You just heard some of the differences for residential garage door operators, for commercial door operators, for gate operators, the differences in safety and the safety requirements. So what does it mean for you? Here are some, I'd say, takeaways or information that you could perhaps use, tomorrow in your business, right? The first thing is products from manufacturers that you see might be different. They have to manufacture the products slightly differently to comply with the requirements in the current standards, in the UL 325 standard. They basically have to manufacture products differently. The control boards would be different, updated instruction manuals. They'll be providing different accessories with the product compared to if the product was only certified for Canada to the old 247 standard. So if you're a purchaser, you're a specifier, you install any of these products, you've probably already seen some of these changes because many of these products are already on the market because they already have met the UL 325 standard. But keep an eye out for these differences and ask your suppliers about the changes coming to their products and if and how their products meet the new UL 325 requirements for Canada. The second bullet regarding instructions. Right? The instruction manual is probably one of the biggest changes you're going to see. In order to comply with the UL 325 standard, there's quite a bit that's added to the instruction manual, and the installation that you have to do may be a little bit different. For example, if you talk about gate operators, right, there's different installation environments. The entrapment zones that need to be protected are defined. Specifically, the photo eye or edge sensor or entrapment protection means that you can install with that specific gate operator, and how you install those. That's all in the instruction manual. There's a lot of information there. Many people in the industry think, oh, wow, there's so much information. I better get a copy of the UL 325 standard so I can learn all of this. Well, if you're a manufacturer, yes, you should get a copy of the standard. You need that to design and test your product. But if you're a dealer or distributor or installer, you really don't need the standard. All you need is the instruction manual for that specific product. And there's an acronym that you may have seen before, but RTFM. And that stands for Read the Full Manual. You have to understand what that manufacturer is recommending for their product and how it's to be installed and the accessories. Some people substitute different words for those letters in the acronym, the RTFM, but I like to say read the full manual. And the last thing is educate your customers. A little information goes a long way. Now that you know some of this information we've covered in the seminar, and you're aware of the published requirements, what they are, and what the standards say and how the standards are different. You also become familiar with the features on the operators and the external devices and accessories that are provided and why they're needed. And these requirements are published in the standard, right? And as we heard before, the standard is the national standard of Canada. In most of the provinces and territories and cities across Canada, it's the law. And you have to comply with these in order to comply with the codes. It's also a good idea for safety, not only the safety of your company, but also the safety of your customers, right? Safety is a good business decision. I want to say that the people on this phone, the attendees, the dealers, installers, service personnel, I say that you are the most important element of this industry. Standards say what they say, the codes say what they say, the manufacturer produce the products, but it's up to you to choose the right product for the job, to install it properly, and to service it properly. To me, that's what matters most. So take this messaging out to your customers when you're installing something. You could explain to them why you're installing this photo eye, why you are installing it at a certain height. why this gate operator needs an edge sensor and a photo eye in this zone, right? And you could explain to them, so it doesn't seem like you're just trying to sell them something extra. No, you're trying to do the job properly to meet established safety requirements, not only for your company's benefit, but more so for the customer. So that's all I wanted to cover for now. I will turn it over to Amancio, who I believe is next.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. Great presentation, by the way. Hello, everyone. How does UL 325 add value to your business? Well, we know sales is not an exact science, so you'll hear keywords like professionalism, customer satisfaction, and trusted advisor, but all within the context of the UL 325 standard. Discussion is short, so it will not be a deep dive into these keywords. However, I trust it will give you enough intel to make you more dangerous, give you a different perspective of the art of selling. So let's assume we run a business and are looking for a door contractor. What comes to mind when we see this picture? I know you're all muted, however, most likely we're all thinking the same, not the most professional representation of a business. Perhaps some of them may be reluctant, hesitant to trust or do business with. So if the question is whether a customer is more or less likely to choose this contractor, I think we know the answer. This company is obviously at a disadvantage. It just don't look professional. So now, let's look at this other picture. Same question. So what comes to mind when we see this picture? Polar opposite, right? The mirror track is nice. However, it only tells half of the story. The other half comes from the company name itself. And we're looking at Garage Door Doctor. And by the way, it is a real company out of the US if you're wondering. So why did this company may have chosen this name and branding? Well, the word doctor creates an association with a trusted professional. So a key word here is professional. Someone we respect, someone we believe, someone we can trust. So we're all industry professionals, right? We want to be the very best in what we do. So what are some of the common traits that make us one? We're experienced, trustworthy, accomplished, trained, educated, skilled. So within the UL 325 context, knowledge of the standard, its importance, implications, how to comply, and its benefits all count towards these traits. So what is the professional advantage? Question. Would a typical customer question a professional electrician on their guidance and advice regarding installation requirements and recommendation? The answer is clear, and it's no. As I've always professed, you are the expert. The electrician is the matter expert on the required codes. It can dictate not only what must be done to comply, but what they will recommend based on the customer's specific application and budget. There should be no reason for anyone to challenge or question your judgment or professional recommendation. So let's throw in another keyword, customer satisfaction. So a quick Google search gives us the following definition. It's a measure of how well a customer's expectations were met in relation to a product and or service. Notice the customer expectations in italics. As the saying goes, customer perception of reality, so this element is subjective. As professionals, we can say that this metric is the result of a strong collaboration with the client towards a tailored solution, the right solution, one we know will not only meet, but exceed your customer's expectations. So well, let me tell you all that we have now, consciously or unconsciously, entered the trusted advisor territory. And this is what helps secure long-term business relationships, mutually rewarding business relationships. As I always say, you see yourself driving clients' loyalty through a differentiated sales experience that makes clients view you as a business advisor, not just as a simple vendor. So this is a huge, huge advantage. All of a sudden, you become first to mind for any future opportunities. So you see yourself getting early information of new projects, prior knowledge, and rarely face external competition or pricing pressure. So we know this works. So how can we quantify customer satisfaction? Well, let's look at some facts. 1 in 3 customers will pay more for a better experience. Companies that provide a great experience have a 16% price premium on products and services. Repeat customer statistics reveal that returning loyal customers spend an average of 33% more per order as compared to others. So what is all this telling us? Firstly, that satisfied customers will in fact pay more and buy more. And secondly, happy customers become repeat customers, which translates into increased sales. So how can UL 325 help guarantee customer satisfaction? The answer is threefold. Quality. We know that UL recognized products must pass rigorous testing. So there is never, ever a compromise in quality. Service. UL 325 helps define the basic product requirements and their importance as a complete system. The standard provides the basic minimum protection. Let's not forget, it's the floor, not ceiling. So use it as a starting point and build from there on. A clear understanding of the standard positions you differently as a trusted advisor. Value. All of a sudden, it isn't difficult to justify a higher cost, a more comprehensive solution with UL recognized products. So you're able to deliver the sometimes elusive, consultative, and professional VIP experience. So to wrap things up, let's don't forget that the standard is the floor, not ceiling. So increased revenue potential is always within reach. Accreditation, certification, understanding of the standard will only help you stand out from the crowd. Make the client think differently. Make your clients embrace the UL safety standard. Become a professional. Become a trusted advisor. You will have the necessary tools to reframe how your customers view their business in a way that drives action towards your solution, your recommendation. Lastly, knowledge of the standard, its importance, and how to comply will only help guarantee best-in-class customer satisfaction. Thank you all for your time. Back to you, David.
Wonderful. Thanks, Amancio. That was fantastic. So that concludes the main presentation, and we're going to run right now into questions from the audience. And whilst we do that, I'm going to leave this slide up here that has some information, which is contact details for the presenters, for myself, Steve, and Amancio. And additionally, you can also see the key organizations and websites that we discussed today. So with that, Mary, do we have any questions?
Hey, David. Yeah, we've got a handful of questions. First one is, when will we start seeing products for sale that comply to the new standard?
Yeah, that's a great one. Steve, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. And I'd say there's a couple ways to answer that. But UL has actually been certifying products to the UL 325 Canadian version since 2017. So some of the products you may already be buying already demonstrate compliance with those new requirements. As David showed on the screen, CSA, when they were certifying products just for Canada, has just this year, I believe, what was it, June? That's what the letter said, or April, that they will stop certifying products to the old standard as of the spring of 2023.
Yeah, that was effective March 1st. Yeah.
March 1st. So you should start seeing those products, hitting the market now. So from a certification side, okay, manufacturers have those products available. As to when they're going to be putting them into the distribution channels and where they're available, that's really up to the manufacturer side. So I'll just default to manufacturers who can answer that one.
Yeah, that's a great lead off point to what Steve was talking about earlier in terms of reach out and talk to the manufacturers that you normally work with. They're going to have a lot of information about this that they can tell you in terms of what products are available and what they're working on and when any new products may become available too. So yeah, great question, Mary.
Yeah, thanks. The next question we have is, who or what body of the Canadian government is enforcing if UL 325 is being adhered to by installers?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And Steve, feel free to jump in, but it's really gonna depend on where you're located in the country. So much similar as it is in the US, each municipality, each area is going to be responsible for ensuring that the code as it was adopted by them is being enforced properly. So I would refer you to your local municipality or province or territory to ensure that you're getting the most up-to-date information. It's going to be different depending on each area, and that's broadly the same as what we see in the US. Would you say that's correct, Steve?
Yep, I would concur with what you said. And I think a good idea is whatever jurisdiction, regional environment you work in, whether it's a city, it's a province, it's a territory, you should know what those codes and regulations are. Reach out to the authorities there, that are doing the inspections, that are enforcing the permits, that, authorize the jobs, pass or fail, and ask them what they're going to be enforcing for these, because you don't want any unpleasant surprises. So you can go ahead and ask, and you get to know what's going to be enforced that way, and you can find out the answer through those channels too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Any other questions, Mary?
Yeah, I think we've got time for one more question. Where can people go to hear more about joining the STP for UL 325?
Great. I guess I can answer that one, huh? Yeah, for sure. The UL standards process is it's a consensus public process, so it's great. We encourage input from anybody. You actually don't need to be on the standards panel in order to submit a proposal or to comment on a proposal. But at the end of the day, to vote on a proposal, you need to be part of the standards technical committee. But you can go to, it's on the screen, ul.com. You can click through there, or perhaps we can put a specific link and send an email out afterwards, or you could just contact me if you take a snapshot of the screen, and I'll be able to connect you directly. There's a link on UL's website where it says to participate in standards development. Here's how to do it. And it's free to apply, and it's free to participate. You just have to submit an application. And then assuming there's room on the panel for more participation, then you could be added to the panel. So various ways to participate and stay abreast. And thanks, I'm glad people might be interested in that.
Yeah, that is good. And it's, as Steve was talking about, and I think all of us said, it's great that, the more participation in the industry, the more voices that are heard, the more representative that it's going to be. So I think that's a great point.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, sure. I think so. Go ahead.
Awesome. Great. Thanks. Do the older products that don't meet the new standard need to be replaced?
That's a.
So go ahead, Dave.
Well, no, go first, Steve. I'm sure you probably got a good answer for that one.
How I would answer that is, again, back to get to know your codes and regulations in your city or province or territory, get to know the inspectors there and what they're enforcing. In some areas, I could comment on the U.S. I know in some areas when new gate operator requirements come out, a new garage for operators, some states say, hey, you cannot service an older product, or you need to replace this instead of servicing it. I don't have, the encyclopedia of across every city and province, territory in Canada, what those exact requirements are for that. What I've seen most often is people don't mandate pulling something out of an installation just to replace it with the new one. But if you're there servicing it or major work needs to be done, then the recommendation is to replace it with the newest technology and the newest products that meet the safety requirements. But whether it's a code or regulation in your area, again, you're going to have to talk to the local jurisdiction.
Yeah, so this goes back to the other, somewhat connected to the other question that we had in terms of who do I speak to. So like Steve was saying, it's going to be the authority that has jurisdiction over that area. So you do need to check, and it's a good thing to be familiar with, right? Like make sure that you're aware of those people, who they are, and how they're interpreting the code and the standard and how it's being enforced, because there will be some variations just from what we've seen in the US. As to how 325 has been brought into each area. But yeah, another good question.
Great, thank you, David, Steve, and Amancio.
All right, wonderful. Well, look, if that's everything that we have, then we'll conclude our session for right now. Thanks for joining, everybody. And as always, we look forward to making your world a safer place. Thanks again for joining us.